Hi student, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu news analysis for 30th of October 2018. So let's get started. So let's look into the first article. The first article says Modi Abe back free Indo-Pacific. So what is the context? So the context is Prime Minister Narendra Modi visits Japan for the 13th annual summit. During the interaction, they work on strengthening the bilateral relationship between India and Japan. On this front, they discuss two important points. One is the strategic front and the other is on the defense cooperation. On the strategic front, they go about discussing the free and the open Indo-Pacific deal. So what do we mean by free and open Indo-Pacific is the next question that pops up. So what this deal basically believes is that the world sees is a symbol of trade and traffic. But this symbol of trade and traffic is being dominated by the hegemony of China. So in order to make sure, as an implicit reference to China's dominance and hegemony, what Japan and India says is that the two leaders are ready to join up in order to enforce a rules-based and an inclusive world order. So there would be fostering of relationship and mutual communication between these two countries in order to make sure that China does not dominate in all these seas. So what they have is in reference to one of the important world agreements, that is United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas. So what they basically go on to say is you have China which does not believe in any of the laws. Let's take the example of South China Sea. Do they believe in all these laws? Not exactly. They have a 9 dashed lines which is according to their historic symbols, and they believe all these neighboring countries have to comply by the Chinese rules. But is it right according to international norms and laws? Not exactly. So in order to fight this dominance and hegemony, what Japan and India believes is that they need to have a strategic cooperation, and that is why they call for free and open Indo-Pacific deal. And at the same time, what it also calls for is a defense cooperation. So what is being talked about and what is also being said in reference to this article is that India and Japan are having certain negotiations, and that is to do with acquisition and cross-servicing agreement. So what is this cross-servicing agreement? So this is one of the logistics sharing pact. So the minute any of the naval ships of India or Japan face certain issues, they would be able to go to another country's backyard and they would be able to service their shipments. So what will happen in this case is Japanese ships will be able to get the fuel as well as service in the Indian naval bases, especially in the Andaman and Nicobar, which is one of the strategic ones. Why? Because it is in line of the Malacca Strait, which is a choke point for Chinese. So they would be able to control and dominate this point, and that is why they are negotiating. So what you will see is India being in the Japan's backyard and Japanese ships coming into Indian backyard to fuel their ships as well as make sure that their certain equipments are intact. What we also have to consider in this condition is that they have some of the unique proposals that they have come up with. So what are these unique proposals? One of the most unique proposals they have come up with is the Cool EMS service. So this Cool EMS service will be one of the initiative that will be taken care by the Ministry of Communication in India. So this will be one of those important protocols which will have one-way service, that is from Japan to India. So what is the service that we are speaking about? Let's say there are Indian customers or the Japan diaspora, and these people want to import the Japanese food for their personal use. So what happens in this case is there will be certain protocol that will be followed according to the Indian regulations and rules, and they'll be able to export food items that is only from Japan to India. So it's not from India to Japan, it's a one-way service that will be sent from Japan to India for personal use to be accommodated to the Japanese diaspora as well as those people who want the Japanese food. So what happens in this case is the food items will be carried by the Japanese post. in special cool boxes which will contain refrigerants to preserve the quality of the food items, and then those people who have ordered this food, that is the addressee, will have to go to the foreign post office in New Delhi. So the point of interest for us is that this is currently only available in Delhi and not in other cities. Why is it available only in Delhi? Because the maximum number of people who want these food items to be imported from Japan to India are located in Delhi. So the industries as well as the Japanese diaspora are in and around Delhi. So as of now, what you see is this service being given to Delhi alone. Another important point that this particular summit goes on to speak is in terms of digital partnership. So what we'll see in this case is you have the Niti Aayog, and you also have certain other ministries of economy, trade and industry on the Japanese side, where they collaborate in the areas of interest like the artificial intelligence, Internet of Things and big data. So what you have is on the Indian side, you have the Niti Aayog, which is collaborating on all these three fronts so that they have certain technology collaboration and transfer. The most important point from this article perspective is on the economic front. So on the economic front, the two countries have agreed to a bilateral swap arrangement that would allow their central banks to exchange local currencies for up to 75 billion. So what do we mean by it? It means that we will have the local currencies being exchanged and dollar will not have any precedent in this case. So you have the Indian rupee as well as the Japanese yen, which will be exchanged on an economic front, but what we will see is dollar not coming into picture. So for the detailed analysis of this bilateral swap, what you can look into is the business economy video, which we will be releasing very shortly. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says ICF rolls out Train 18, the next generation Shatabdi. So what is this article all about? So what we are speaking is about one of the new trains that will be launched, and that is the Train 18. So this can be a prospective question in your GS paper 3 economy as to what are the updates and reforms that the Indian Railways has brought about for the safety measures, as well as this can be a prospective questions in your prelims as well. So what we are discussing here is with respect to the Train 18, which is one of the semi-high speed trains which will be replacing the Shatabdi Express. So what we will have to consider is that there are two important variations with respect to Train 18 and Shatabdi Express. One of the key things is in reference to the speed. So when we speak of speed of this Train 18, the speed of it is about 160 kilometers per hour. But when we consider the Shatabdi Express, it is about 130 kilometers per hour. So because the speed of this Train 18 is comparatively more, what you will see is you will be able to reach the destination much prior. So the delay is comparatively reduced. And what you see in Shatabdi Expresses, the relay is comparatively more. So what you have is the time taken to reach the particular destination is more. So this semi-high speed is built up with a cost of about 100 crores, and all of its components, that is almost 80% of its technology, design and manufacture happens to be in India. Another 20% happens to be an import of some other countries. Let's see what are these countries that we are speaking about. So one, you have the French, where all the seats have been designed by the French company. And then you have Germany, where the brakes and couplers are designed by Germany. And then you have Czech Republic, the door system is designed by Czech. So it is a 100 crore project, and majority 80% of it is indigenously designed, but the other segments are also designed from imports from these countries. But what are the unique features that we should be considering? So when we consider the unique features, the first unique feature that we have is the automatic doors. So what do I mean by it? Currently we do not have the automatic doors in the railway system like in the Shatabdi. So what we have is a system like how it functions in the metro. So you have the automatic doors which will stop in a particular station, and after all the passengers have bought in, the doors are shut, and after all the passengers have got out, that is when the doors will be shut. So you have the train which will stop to ensure the safety of the passengers. The train would only start after the doors have all shut. And the other important points that we have to consider is it has a Wi-Fi system, it has a GPS based passenger information system, it has a touch free bio vacuum toilets, LED lighting, mobile charging points, as well as climate control system that will adjust the temperature according to occupancy. So these are the important and unique features of this. And as a future plan, what we also have is the train 20. So this train 20 will be a similar one like the train 18, and this will be replacing the Rajdhani Express. So the train 18 is replacing the Shatabdi Express, and the train 20 will be replacing the Rajdhani Express. So this is all we have to know in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says Odisha launches disaster alert system for its coast. So what is that article all about? So we see that Odisha areas which are always destructed, and there is warning system deficiency. So there is large scale lives that have been lost, and what you see is destruction of the property. So in order to make sure that the lives are saved, in order to make sure that the amount of lives that have been lost are comparatively reduced, what the government has come up with is one of the unique systems, and that is the early warning dissemination system. So the next question that pops up is, what is that the early warnings dissemination system does? So what this will basically go on to do is, it will have about 122 towers that will be installed along the 480 kilometer coastline. So you have the coastline across the Odisha. So you will have all these towers that will be constructed across the coastline, and these constructed towers will be controlled by the State Emergency Center in Bhubaneswar. So what will happen is, you will have the different communication system that will be attached. So this communication system will have a technology such as the satellite based mobile data voice network, digital mobile radio, mass messaging system, universal communication, and interface for interoperability. So the minute you have all these systems synced, this would be able to dispatch the messages to the people, that is the local community who are along the Odisha's coastline, as well as those fishermen who are in need of the messages. So the minute this system is activated, you will have an activation message that will be sent from the center to the coastline trigger systems, where you will have alarms that will be synced, and then you will have the local communities warned about this information. So you will also have one of the SMS scheme, where this SMS will be sent to all the fishermen, and these fishermen would be able to come back to coastal life so that they can save their lives as well. So what we have to understand in this condition is that this is a last mile connectivity project that has been taken care by the central government as well as the state government. But what is the most important point is, this will also have the assistance of the World Bank. So kindly remember all these factual data. This can be a prospective question in your prelims as well as the mains examination. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says Supreme Court junks Kerala order on staff's donation to fund. So what is the context? So when we look into the context, it says that the Supreme Court dismissed a petition filed by the Kerala government challenging a state high court decision staying a government order that employees should donate a month's salary to the Chief Ministerial's Disaster Relief Fund. Let's get back to the Kerala's floods. So Kerala saw one of the most devastating floods after 1924. So there was destruction of property, and they had a huge economic loss. In order to fight this economic loss, the state government had taken number of initiatives. They did ask the people for their voluntary donation, and one such donation was in reference to the Chief Minister Disaster Relief Fund. They did ask the central government as well, and central government gave about 600 crores, and it will be dispatching more amount. But what the Kerala government also did during this period was, they enforced one of the acts where they asked all the state government employees to compulsorily pay 1 month of their salary to this fund. So what the state government did in this case is they did not give a voluntary option to the people, that is the state government employees as well as the teachers, but instead they enforced a rule where it became a compulsory affair. So people, that is the employees who were reluctant and they were not ready to donate 1 month of their salary to this distress fund, should give their dissent in writing, was the notification that was released by the Kerala government. So those who cannot give a month's salary in a single sweep can also give it in 10 installations. So what was the crux of it? That all the state government employees and the teachers will have to pay to this distress fund. If they are able to pay the state government, what the government would have collected is about 3,800 crores, and this could have helped the disaster relief. But this particular notification was stayed by the High Court, and then it goes up to the Supreme Court. And now what the Supreme Court says is all these donations should have to be on a voluntary basis, and the government will not be able to enforce and make it a compulsory move. People should be giving it on their voluntary basis, but they should not make it a compulsory move because it is their hard-earned money. There are people who would want to give, and this should be on a voluntary basis. So you can take money from those people who are giving voluntarily, but you cannot make it compulsory. And what it further goes on to say is that there are people who are voicing their opinion against this is because it is their only source of livelihood. And when their salary is their only source of livelihood and people are dependent on this, how can you, the state government, compulsorily voice it? So what the Supreme Court has said is that you cannot make it compulsory, but instead if people are voluntarily giving it, you can take this fund for the distress relief, but this will not be a compulsory one, is what the Supreme Court has said in this case. So in the future precedents, what we have to understand is, in case the government comes up with a notification for compulsorily withdrawing the money from the state government employees' salary, this cannot be done. Why? Because the Supreme Court has come up with this judgment. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says children under 15 at serious risk from polluted air, says the World Health Organization. So what is the context? There was one of the reports from the World Health Organization which said that 93% of the world's children under the age of 15, that is about 1.8 billion children, breathe polluted air that puts their health and development at serious risk. So what are the health issues that they would be able to face? One they'll have is the neurodevelopment, the other is the cognitive test outcomes. So they'll not be able to have a gradual transformation, they'll not have the development in their brains and thought process, and this will negatively affect their mental as well as the motor development. And further it says that these people will further have certain chronic disabilities, chronic diseases, such that they may face cardiovascular diseases in the near future. And further it goes on to say that those pregnant women who are exposed to the polluted air are more likely to give premature birth, and those babies that are delivered will have small, low birth to weight ratio. So these are the health impact because of the pollution. So the next question that pops up is, why are children more susceptible to this? For which we have to understand their breathing pattern. So the breathing pattern in the children is comparatively more. They breathe more than the adults. So because they breathe more, they are more vulnerable to the pollution because they breathe more rapidly. And at the same time, what we also have to consider is, because children most usually are close to the ground, there are babies who crawl, they are all the time on the ground playing with them, and because there is maximum and peak concentration of pollution at the ground level, they are more susceptible to it. So what we have to consider in this case is, the adults are also more mobile in nature. They are moving from one place to another. But what happens in the newborns is, they are almost most of the time in the household. And when there are families which use burning fuels like the wood or the kerosene for cooking as well as heating and lighting, these babies are exposed to the burning fuels, and that is also the prime reason as to why they are facing more consequences due to pollution. So what are the measures that we are supposed to take? So when we look into the measures, what we can basically go on to do is, all the schools and the creches and baby schools that we have should almost be placed away from the major source of air pollution. Let's say for example the busy roads or the factories or the power plants. So all these places which are compulsorily busy, which emanate a lot of pollution, and all these schools should be staying away from this. So the first point is the schools and the playground should be located away from the major sources of air pollution like the busy roads, factories and the power plants. Next important point that we have to consider is there are certain World Health Organization guidelines. So every country should follow and enhance their health and safety of the children following the World Health Organization guidelines. So what do we mean by it? Currently what we have is a large scale dependence on fossil fuels. So every government should have a global energy mix. So they should swing towards the renewable energy sources. They should have better waste management plans, and what they should also do is they should provide clean technologies for the household cookings. And what this article also speaks about is the World Health Organization's first ever global conference on air pollution and health. So what is this platform all about? So this will provide an opportunity to all the stakeholders, let's say the world leaders, which will include the ministers of health, energy and environment. You will have the heads of the intergovernmental organizations. You will have scientists from all around the world, and then NGOs and civil society who have come up together on this conference, where they'll be able to see pollution as a global threat, and they'll be able to come up with measures and new technologies to fight this. So basically what we have is the health sector, education and also the NGOs coming up, so that they would be able to transform this process and communicate more and engage more, so that there is intersectoral policy making that we will see in this first ever global conference. As of now, this is what we have to understand, but this will be on 31st where we will be taking up this article further. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So this article is in reference to the Yemen crisis. So in order to understand what this article is all about, what we have to head is in understanding of the background. Let's go back to the year 2011. So what happens in 2011 is you have the Tunisian revolution that breaks up. So on this revolution front, what you also see is a number of countries in the West Asia springing up the revolution front. So you have the Egyptian revolution, you have the Arab Spring protest. All this happens in the year 2011. So on this background, what we also have is the Yemen uprising. So what is this Yemen uprising that we are speaking about? So these were the protests that happened in Yemen due to the unemployment, economic conditions, corruption, and all this was voiced against the government. So initially, which was voiced against corruption, also goes against the protesters' escalated call for resignation of then Yemeni president, and that is Saleh. So what happens here is, then we have in the year 2012 transfer of power that takes place from Saleh to what we have is the President Hadi, and this power transfer agreement happens in the presence of the GCC, that is the Gulf Cooperation Council, in the presence of Saudi Arabia. So during this power transmission, and what we also would encounter is that Hadi will not be able to face all the problems. So we did discuss there are number of problems with reference to the economics. We did see that there was large scale corruption, unemployment as well as food insecurity. So all these challenges that was embroiling this region was not able to be taken up by Hadi, so he is not capable of answering all the calls of the people, and that is when there is a power vacuum that is created, and this power vacuum was replaced by continuous threats by Al-Qaeda and Houthi. So first point that we have to understand in this case is who are the Houthis. So basically the Houthis are one of the rebel groups in Yemen, and they follow one of the branch of Shia Muslim, and that is called as the Zaydism. So 2011, the Houthis joined the protest against the President Saleh back in 2011, and they took advantage of the power vacuum to expand their territorial control in Sada. And way back in 2014, what these Houthi fighters further do is they sweep the entire capital of Sana'a. And in 2015, what they further do is they have a complete control of this area that is marked in green, and they make sure that they declare themselves as the government, dissolving the entire parliament and installing an interim revolutionary committee. So now what we have is all these areas being captured, and the minute there is capture of this place, what we also see is the president of Yemen, Hadi, who goes back to Saudi Arabia for help. That is when Saudi Arabia enters this particular fight. So what we see in this particular case is that Saudi Arabia started the attack in 2015 against the Yemen government that has been captured by certain people called the Houthis. So what they feel in this case is that the Houthis are the ones who are practicing the Shia Muslims, and they are nothing but the proxies of Iran. So the minute they feel that they are the proxies of Iran, Saudi Arabia wants to acknowledge it, and they're all worried that this is one of the movements that Iran is taking and doing it, where they want to establish a stable rule in the backyard of Saudi Arabia. So what they sense is that this is one of the motives of Iran to establish a government by the Houthis, where the Houthis are the Shia Muslims, and Iran, being one of the supporters of Shia Muslimhood, is planning to establish a government in the backyard of Saudi Arabia. So what do the Saudi Arabian government do? So the Saudi Arabian government here makes sure that the Hadi government, which is the genuine government, replaces this proxy government in the form of Houthis. So they go on and bombard the Yemen, which is being currently held by one of the groups which is supported by Iran. But Iran has time again said that we are not supporting Houthis, but what Saudi Arabia has done in this case is it has embraced more of violence rather than communicating at the doorstep level. And what this has led to is the grave human rights violations. So what are the human rights violations that we are speaking about? The conflict has already killed over 6,000 civilians and injured 10,000 and more. Unable to defeat the rebels, the Saudi coalition has imposed a blockade on the country, worsening the Yemen's food and medicine crisis. 14 million are extremely dependent on aid for survival. Besides, there was a deadly cholera outbreak in the country that was affected at least 1.1 million people. So there is large scale human rights violations, and what this article speaks about is addressing these human rights violations. So what is the importance that we have to understand is that there are certain concerns that the world community also faces. So what are the concerns? We already discussed that there is Al-Qaeda's presence in here. There is also this Houthis here, and we also see that there is ISIS, which is one of the important terrorist organizations which could create a paranoia in this region. Why? Because the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula as well as the Islamic State could take advantage of this chaos that has been resulting because of the bombarding of Saudi Arabia in Yemen, and they may seize certain territory in the south, and this could be a breeding ground for instability. And when there is instability in this region, what we will also see is the economic crisis. Why is the economic crisis? That is because of the strategically important Bab el-Mandab Strait. So it is this narrow strait which is acting as a link between the Red Sea as well as the Gulf of Aden, where much of the world's oil shipment pass through. So because all the shipments of oil pass through this region, in case this Al-Qaeda as well as ISIS is able to block it, then what we will see is the energy crisis that all the world countries relying on this common platform will face. So what are the major concerns the world will see? One is in terms of the instability, the other is the economic crisis that we see because of the oil blockade. So in order to address this, what we need is a proper understanding of this particular idea. So what Saudi Arabia has to do in this case is making sure that it addresses all the geopolitical considerations in this particular case. So what should Saudi Arabia do in this case? So Saudi Arabia should make sure that it is able to address all these issues directly with Iran. What it should not do is it should not bombard Yemen, but instead what it should do is have negotiations with Iran directly. So it should not punish the people of Yemen in this case, where there is large scale human rights violations that have already been committed, and we did see all these concerns that have been voiced. So instead what should happen right now is it should cease the bombing campaign, lift all the blockade that it has done, allow food as well as medicine supplies into Yemen, and instead it should directly speak to the Iranian government, it should speak to the Yemeni government, it should speak the rebels. So all these major stakeholders involving Iran, the rebels, the Yemeni government in Saudi Arabia under Hadi should all be coming on a common platform. They should be addressing all these issues and they should be deciding the future course of action. So what we should understand in this case is that military solution to Yemen crisis can never be solved, and what we will see is communication and intercommunication that will require all these stakeholders coming up on the common platform. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into some of the practice questions. Recently, a series of uprisings of people referred to as Arab Spring originally started from. So the answer for this is Tunisia. Which of the following is not a member of Gulf Cooperation Council? The answer for this is Iran. So moving on, the next practice question. Operation Decisive Storm seen recently in news is related to Yemen civil war. So moving on, let's look into the practice question. Saudi-led fight is a struggle for hegemony rather than against poverty, hunger and legitimate power in Yemen. Analyze. So we have already discussed this in terms of the editorial. So kindly write all your answers for the same on the comment section so that we can evaluate and give you the relevant feedback. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.